The council chamber stank. It was a mix of burnt metal and something wet and sour that Daniel Reed couldn't quite place. Alien body odor, maybe. Or fear. Though right now, the only one afraid in this room was supposed to be him. Commander Vrakos sat sprawled across his command throne like he owned the universe. Maybe he thought he did. His 4 eyes, 2 large ones in front, 2 smaller ones on the sides of his head, tracked Daniel's every movement. The Krellian leader's mouthparts clicked and scraped together, making sounds that Daniel's translator earpiece turned into words dripping with contempt. "Look at you," Vrakos said, leaning forward. His segmented body creaked as he moved. "Standing there in your little uniform like it means something. Tell me, human, what exactly do you think you're going to accomplish here?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He let his eyes wander around the chamber instead. 20 Krellian officials sat in a half-circle, all watching him with the same expression. Amusement. Like he was some kind of pet that had learned a cute trick. Through the massive windows behind Vrakos, Daniel could see New Horizon. His home. The colony world where he'd grown up, where his sister still lived, or used to live before the Krellians came. Smoke rose from a dozen fires across the settlement. Krellian patrol ships flew low over the residential sectors, probably rounding up more workers for their mining operations. 300,000 humans lived on New Horizon. Every single one of them was now a slave in everything but name. "I'm here to negotiate," Daniel said finally. His voice came out steady. That was good. He'd practiced for hours to make sure it would. The Krellians burst out laughing. It wasn't like human laughter. It was this weird chittering, scraping noise that made Daniel's teeth hurt. The sound bounced off the polished metal walls and seemed to come from everywhere at once. Vrakos stood up. His body unfolded section by section like some kind of biological telescope, until he towered 3 meters tall. His shadow fell across Daniel like a threat. "Negotiate." Vrakos's voice dropped low. "Child, you don't negotiate when you have nothing to offer. You beg. And even then we might not listen." "We had a fleet," one of the other Krellians called out. 6 months ago your species had warships. Had defenses. Had pride. The official's translator made the words sound almost sad. "Now you have nothing. We made sure of that." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. He remembered watching the battle from the surface. The human defense fleet had lasted 40 minutes against the Krellian armada. 40 minutes and then it was just debris in orbit. Pieces of ships. Pieces of people. All of it burning as it fell through the atmosphere. "Earth sent you here alone," Vrakos continued, circling Daniel slowly. "No soldiers. No weapons. Just one diplomat in a fancy suit. Do you know what that tells me? It tells me your leaders have given up. They're hoping we'll be satisfied with 12 colony worlds. That we'll stop before we reach Earth itself. Will you?" Daniel asked. "Why would we?" Vrakos stopped in front of him. "Your species is weak. Scattered. Broken. You fight among yourselves. You build things just to tear them down again. You're like children playing with building blocks, and now the adults have arrived to show you how the universe really works." Daniel reached slowly into his jacket. Every Krellian guard in the room raised their weapons. Nasty-looking things that hummed with stored energy. Vrakos held up one clawed hand, and the guards hesitated. "Let's see what the human brought," Vrakos said. "Please show us your pathetic last offering." Daniel pulled out a stone. It was small enough to fit in his palm, smooth and dark like river rock. But it wasn't just any rock. Symbols covered its surface, strange, flowing marks that seemed to move when you looked at them too long. They weren't human writing. They weren't Krellian either. They were older than both. "That's it." Vrakos leaned in close, his breath hot and rank. "A rock with scratches on it? This is what humanity sends? This is your final weapon?" "It's not a weapon," Daniel said quietly. "It's a reminder." "A reminder of what? Your primitive past? We know about your mythology, human. Dragons and monsters and magic. Children's stories to help you sleep at night. The universe doesn't care about your fairy tales." Daniel turned the stone over in his hand. It was warm. It was always warm, even in the coldest room. His grandfather had given it to him when he was 10 years old. Had made him memorize words in a language that hurt his throat to speak. Had told him stories that seemed impossible. "My people made a promise once," Daniel said. He wasn't talking to Vrakos anymore. He was talking to himself. Remembering. "A long time ago, before we ever left Earth. Before we knew about aliens or spaceships or any of this. We made a promise to beings that lived on our world. Beings that could have destroyed us without breaking a sweat." "More mythology," Vrakos waved a dismissive claw. "This is boring. Guards, remove. Daniel spoke 3 words. The language was old. Older than any human civilization. The words didn't come from his throat so much as through it, like his body was just an instrument playing someone else's song. The air in the chamber vibrated. Not sound exactly. Something deeper. Something that made the walls hum and the floor tremble. Vrakos froze. His 4 eyes went wide. What did you? The mountain moved. Through the massive windows, Daniel watched as the peak behind the settlement, the one that had stood unchanged for centuries, suddenly split down the middle. Not an earthquake. Not an explosion. The mountain was opening like a door, like something inside had decided it was time to wake up. That's not possible, one of the Krellian officials whispered. A roar cut through the air. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't anything that engines or technology could make. It was raw and ancient and furious, and it made every instinct in Daniel's body scream at him to run. But he didn't run. He'd been preparing for this moment his entire life. The Krellian guards backed away from the windows. Vrakos's mouth parts hung open, clicking uselessly. What is that? Vrakos finally managed. What did you do? Daniel looked up at the Krellian commander. For the first time since entering the chamber, he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. You asked where our weapons went, Daniel said softly. You assumed we were weak because our ships are destroyed. Because our colonies are conquered. Because we came here without guns or bombs or anything you could understand. Something massive rose from the mountain. Wings, enormous, leathery wings, spread wide enough to cast shadows over half the settlement. Scales caught the sunlight and reflected it in colors that didn't have names. Eyes opened, each one bigger than a Krellian patrol ship, glowing with intelligence that predated written language. You never asked the right question, Daniel continued. His hand closed around the oath stone, and he felt warmth spread up his arm. Recognition. Remembrance. You should have asked why humanity explored the stars in the first place. Why we built colonies on worlds that were too dangerous. Why we went to places we had no business going. The creature, the dragon, threw back its head and roared again. This time the sound shattered windows. Krellian officials dove for cover. Alarms started screaming throughout the building. We weren't running away from Earth, Daniel said. We were making room. Room for our oldest friends. Our first alliance. The beings we made a promise to 500 years ago. Vrakos stared at the dragon, then at Daniel, then back at the dragon. His translator couldn't seem to keep up with the rapid clicking of his mouth parts. This is impossible, Vrakos finally said. Dragons aren't real. They're mythology. Fiction. They can't. You're right about one thing, Daniel interrupted. We came here with nothing you could see. No fleet. No weapons. No power that made sense to you. He held up the oath stone. But you forgot something important. Humans don't fight alone. We never have. We're really good at making friends. Even with things that should be impossible. In the distance, more mountains were opening. More roars echoed across New Horizon. Daniel counted them in his head. 17. 17 dragons waking up after 200 years of sleep. And somewhere up in orbit, 17 more Krellian warships were about to have a very bad day. So here's my warning, Commander, Daniel said. The one you didn't want to hear. Leave our worlds. Free our people. And pray we decide to let you go home. Vrakos couldn't speak. He could only stare as the dragon spread its wings and launched itself into the sky, heading straight for the Krellian fleet above. Daniel turned and walked toward the door. The guards didn't try to stop him. They were too busy watching their world change forever. Lieutenant James Foster had been staring at screens for 6 hours straight, and his eyes felt like sandpaper. But that wasn't why his hands were shaking. The data scrolling across his monitor made no sense. None at all. This can't be right, he muttered, tapping the screen like that would somehow fix whatever glitch was causing the readings. The sensors must be broken. He was sitting at his station on the bridge of the Dominion's Fist, the Krellian command ship that controlled the entire occupation fleet. Around him, other crew members worked at their posts, clicking and chittering in that way Krellians did when they were relaxed. Confident. They thought this was just another boring day of occupation duty. They had no idea what was coming. Sir, Threll called from the sensor station. He was young for a Krellian officer, still learning his job. His voice had that nervous edge that annoyed Commander Vrakos. I'm picking up seismic activity. A lot of it. Where? Foster asked, pulling up the geological monitoring system. New Horizon was a stable planet. No volcanoes. No fault lines. Earthquakes here were rarer than honest politicians. Everywhere, Threll said. Not just here. I'm getting reports from all 12 occupied worlds. The ground is moving. Foster felt his stomach tighten. He'd been in the Krellian military for 8 years. Fought in 4 campaigns. He knew what pre-invasion sensor readings looked like. This wasn't that. This was something else. Something wrong. Show me the mountain range, Foster said. The one behind the human settlement. The main view screen shifted, showing the jagged peaks that ran along New Horizons' western continent. They'd surveyed those mountains when they first arrived. Ancient rock. Solid granite. Nothing interesting. The humans had some old mining facilities there, but they'd been abandoned for decades. Empty caves. Dead tunnels. Nothing worth investigating. Except now those mountains were glowing on the thermal scan. Heat signatures, Threll reported, his voice climbing an octave. Multiple contacts emerging from underground. Moving fast. Sir, the size readings, they can't be accurate. Each one is registering as large as a frigate. That's impossible, Foster said, but he was already pulling up the detailed scan. Ships don't hide underground. And the humans don't have any ships left anyway. We destroyed their fleet 6 months ago. The holographic display flickered to life in the center of the bridge. 17 contacts appeared, rendered in bright red against the blue background of the planet. They were rising from the mountains, moving through solid rock like it wasn't even there. The computer kept trying to classify them as vessels, but the biosignature readings were off the charts. They're alive, Foster whispered. Those aren't ships. They're living things. That's impossible, Threll repeated Foster's words back at him. Nothing biological can be that large. The gravity alone would. The first one broke through the clouds. Foster saw it on the external cameras before his brain could process what he was looking at. Scales that caught the sunlight and threw it back in shades of copper and bronze. Wings that spread so wide they seemed to touch both horizons. A head the size of a cargo hauler, with eyes that glowed like molten gold. By the void, Foster breathed. He'd heard that expression his whole life, a Krellian curse that didn't really mean anything. But right now, staring at that thing, he felt like he was actually looking into some kind of cosmic emptiness that could swallow him whole. Is that a dragon? Threll asked. His voice had gone quiet. Childlike. Like from the human stories? Dragons aren't real, Foster said automatically. But even as the words left his mouth, he could see how stupid they sounded. The creature was right there. Real. Solid. Impossibly huge and moving with a grace that made his military training scream danger signals at him. And there was someone on its back. Magnify, Foster ordered. His voice cracked. Zoom in on the rider. The image expanded. A human sat astride the dragon's neck, right where the massive skull met the spine. She wore armor that looked organic, like it had been grown instead of built. It moved with her body, flexing and shifting. Her face was young, maybe 25, maybe 30. Blonde hair pulled back in a tight braid. Gray eyes that looked cold even from 3 kilometers away. All ships, battle stations. Commander Vrakos's voice exploded over the comm system, making half the bridge crew jump. This is not a drill. Defensive formations. Fire at will. The dragon dove. Foster watched it happen in what felt like slow motion. The creature tucked its wings and dropped like a stone, accelerating faster than any ship he'd ever seen. The rider stayed perfectly balanced, moving with the dragon like they were one organism. Target lock, the weapons officer shouted. Firing. Plasma bolts streaked out from the Dominion's fist, brilliant blue-white lances of energy that could punch through battleship armor like tissue paper. They'd destroyed the entire human fleet with these weapons. Nothing could withstand them. The bolts hit the dragon's scales and splashed off like water hitting hot metal. What? Foster stared at the damage assessment screen. 0 penetration? That's impossible. Those bolts carry enough energy to. The dragon opened its mouth. What came out wasn't fire. Foster had seen flamethrowers, incendiary weapons, plasma torches. This was different. This was energy in its purest form, something that existed in the space between matter and light. It poured from the dragon's jaws in a continuous stream, and where it touched the Dominion's fist shields, they just stopped existing. Shields down, someone screamed. All forward shields offline. How is that possible? Evasive maneuvers. Foster yelled, but he wasn't the captain. He was just a lieutenant. Nobody listened to him. The ship tried to turn. Massive thrusters fired, pushing the command vessel into a banking roll that would have been impressive if they were fighting another ship. But the dragon wasn't a ship. It moved like thought, like intention made physical. It adjusted its dive instantly, tracking the Dominion's fist's movement before the turn even started. Then it hit them. The claws came first. Each one was the size of a landing craft, curved and black and sharp enough to cut through hull plating like it was cardboard. They punched into the ship's side and Foster felt the impact through his boots. The deck lurched. His station sparked and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Hull breach, someone was screaming. Sections 12 through 18 venting atmosphere. Seal the bulkheads. That was Commander Vrakos, his voice tight with something Foster had never heard from him before. Fear. All weapons concentrate fire on that thing. More plasma bolts lanced out. The dragon was too close now, practically hugging the hull. Its wings wrapped around the ship's midsection, and Foster realized with horror what it was doing. It was holding them, keeping them from moving while it tore them apart piece by piece. Through the viewport, Foster caught one last clear look at the rider. She was directing the attack with small hand gestures, pointing at specific sections of the hull. The dragon responded instantly, tearing exactly where she indicated. They were targeting the weapons arrays, the engine mountings, the command structure. The woman's gray eyes met Foster's through the reinforced glass. Just for a second. There was no anger in them. No hate. Just a cold, professional assessment like a surgeon deciding where to cut. Then the viewport shattered. The explosion threw Foster backward. He hit the bulkhead hard enough to crack something in his chest. Air screamed out through the breach. The emergency seals slammed shut, cutting off half the bridge. Foster found himself on the wrong side in a section that still had atmosphere. Through the gap he could see space. And dragons. Not just one. 19 of them. Maybe more. They moved through the Krellian fleet like sharks through fish. Everyone had a human rider. Everyone was tearing ships apart with terrifying efficiency. This isn't a battle, Foster realized, watching a copper-scaled dragon peel open a destroyer like someone opening a can. This is an execution. The Dominion's fist shuddered again. More hull breaches. More sections going dark. Foster pulled himself to a functioning console and accessed the fleet-wide data. What he saw made his blood run cold. 17 Krellian warships destroyed in the first 10 minutes. 8 more crippled and venting atmosphere. The humans weren't just winning. They were dominating. The dragons moved faster than missiles, hit harder than railguns, and shrugged off weapons that should have vaporized them. And the riders, the humans, they guided every attack with perfect precision. No wasted movement. No random destruction. They knew exactly what they were doing. They've done this before, Foster whispered. This isn't their first battle. They've trained for this. Practiced. How long have they been preparing? The answer came to him as he watched another dragon, this one deep blue with silver highlights, tear through a cruiser's engine section. The rider was an older man with gray hair, moving with the calm confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Generations. The humans had been preparing for generations. All those abandoned facilities in the mountains. The dead tunnels and empty caves. They'd been hiding the dragons. Keeping them secret. Waiting. We never had a chance, Foster said to nobody. From the moment we attacked their worlds we were already dead. We just didn't know it yet. The Dominion's fist gave one final shudder and went dark. Emergency systems failed. Gravity cut out. Foster floated in the red-lit darkness, watching through the shattered viewport as the dragon and its rider moved on to their next target. The Krellian occupation of New Horizon was over. It had lasted exactly 47 minutes. The stairs went down forever. Daniel Reed had been descending for 20 minutes, and his legs were starting to burn. Each step was cut from solid rock, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. His grandfather had walked these stairs. His great-grandmother before that. Every Oathkeeper in his family line had made this journey at least once. The Oathstone in his hand pulsed with warmth. Not heat exactly. More like the feeling of holding something alive. Something aware. The symbols carved into its surface glowed faintly in the darkness, providing just enough light to see by. Daniel could smell the cavern before he reached the bottom. Ancient stone. Mineral deposits. And something else. Something that reminded him of thunderstorms and deep ocean water. The smell of power that had been sleeping for a very long time. The stairs ended at a floor so vast Daniel couldn't see the far wall. The ceiling arched overhead like a cathedral, natural stone columns rising up into shadows that his little light couldn't reach. This place had been carved by time and something far more deliberate. Dragonfire, his grandfather had told him. Dragons shaped these caverns with their breath, making sanctuaries where they could rest away from the world above. And at the center of it all she waited. Empress Aurelia. Daniel had seen pictures in the old books. Drawings and paintings that Oathkeepers had made over the centuries. None of them had prepared him for the reality. She was massive. 400 meters from the tip of her snout to the end of her tail, easily. Her scales were the deep blue of Earth's oceans, the kind of blue you only saw in the deepest parts where sunlight barely reached. Each scale was the size of a dinner plate, overlapping in patterns that seemed both random and perfectly designed. But it was her eyes that stopped Daniel in his tracks. They were ancient. Not just old, but ancient in a way that made him feel like a mayfly. Like his entire species was just a brief moment in her long, long existence. Those eyes held wisdom and sadness and something that might have been disappointment. Oathkeeper. Her voice didn't come through his ears. It resonated directly in his mind, vibrating through his thoughts like a tuning fork. It has been long since your kind called upon us. Daniel forced his legs to move. He walked forward until he stood at the base of her massive head, then dropped to one knee. The oath stone felt hot now, almost burning. He pressed it against his forehead in the traditional gesture of respect. 218 years, Majesty, he said. His voice sounded tiny in the vast space. Since the Treaty of Silent Wings. Yes. Aurelia's head lowered, bringing one eye down to Daniel's level. The eye alone was bigger than he was, glowing with an inner light that cast his shadow across the cavern floor. When humanity decided it no longer needed legends. When you chose technology over wonder. Progress over partnership. Daniel felt the accusation in those words. The hurt. Dragons didn't just sleep because they were tired. They withdrew because humans had pushed them away. Stopped believing. Stopped remembering. Tell me, Oathkeeper, Aurelia continued, why I should wake my children for a species that chose to forget us. You built your ships and flew to the stars without us. You colonized worlds and never thought to ask if we wanted to see them too. You grew comfortable with machines and forgot what it meant to bond with something truly alive. Daniel had prepared for this. He'd written speeches on the transport ship coming here. Logical arguments about mutual benefit and strategic advantage. Appeals to ancient honor and old promises. He'd practiced them until they sounded perfect. Standing here looking into those ancient eyes, all of it seemed hollow. Aurelia would see through any polished speech in a heartbeat. She'd probably heard better arguments from humans who'd been dead for centuries. So Daniel told her the truth instead. We never forgot, he said quietly. Not all of us. The Oathkeepers kept the stories alive. We passed them down through our families, generation after generation. On every colony world humans built, we made sure there were hidden places. Secret rooms where children could learn the old songs. Where they could hear about dragons and remember. He reached into his satchel with shaking hands and pulled out a small book. The cover was worn, stained with dirt and something that might have been blood. He opened it carefully. This belonged to Emily Grant, Daniel said. She was 8 years old when the Krellians invaded New Horizon. They killed her parents in the first week. Took her and her little brother to a work camp. The pages were filled with crayon drawings. Crude like any child's art, but filled with love and hope. Dragons in flight, their wings spread wide. Dragons breathing fire at enemies. Dragons standing guard over small human figures. The colors were bright, reds and blues and greens that children love. Daniel's throat tightened as he turned to the last page. A small stick figure sat on the back of a great blue dragon, soaring above clouds drawn in white crayon. At the top, in shaky letters, Emily had written, "When the dragons come back." The Krellians found this during a random inspection, Daniel continued. His voice cracked but he pushed through. They didn't understand what it was. Just saw a human child with contraband art. They asked her what it meant. She told them the dragons would come back someday. That they always came back when humans needed them. He had to stop. Take a breath. The next part was harder. They killed her for it. Said she was spreading dangerous ideas. Encouraging resistance. She was 8 years old and she died believing in you. Believing you'd come back. Aurelia was silent for a long moment. Her massive head bowed, bringing her snout nearly to the ground. When she finally spoke, her mental voice was softer. Gentle. Show me more. Daniel pulled out other items from his satchel. A wooden carving made by a teenager on New Terra, showing a dragon and rider in flight. A poem written by an old woman on the colony of Far Haven, describing the day dragons first came to Earth. A song sheet with lyrics in the old language, passed down through 16 generations of Oathkeepers. We kept the faith, Daniel said. Maybe humanity as a whole forgot. Maybe the governments and the military and the corporations pushed you aside for newer, shinier things. But we didn't. The Oath Keepers never stopped teaching our children. Never stopped believing that someday the bond would matter again. The sanctuaries, Aurelia said suddenly. The sleeping places on your colony worlds. What of them? Daniel's face went hard. Violated. The Krellians strip mine everything. They found 3 sanctuaries while searching for mineral deposits. They didn't know what they were. Didn't care. They just dug through them looking for resources to steal. Aurelia's eyes blazed. The glow went from soft gold to brilliant white. The temperature in the cavern jumped 10 degrees in an instant. Around them the rock trembled. And Daniel felt it, other presences waking up. Ancient minds stirring from deep sleep, reaching out to touch Aurelia's consciousness and understand what had disturbed them. There were dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Dragons of every size and color, sleeping in chambers throughout the vast cavern system. They'd been dormant for more than 2 centuries, waiting for a call that might never come. Now they were waking up. And they were angry. Call the Oath Keepers, Aurelia commanded. Her voice filled Daniel's mind with such force that he staggered backward. Every human who remembers the old words. Every child who kept the faith. Every family that passed down the stories when the rest of your species tried to bury them. She rose to her full height, and Daniel finally understood just how massive she truly was. Her wings spread out, filling the entire cavern from wall to wall. The membrane between the bones was translucent, glowing with inner light. She was beautiful and terrible, and Daniel felt tears running down his face for reasons he couldn't quite explain. The dragons will fly once more, Aurelia declared. And the galaxy will remember why it learned to fear the dark between stars. Why ancient species spoke our names in whispers. Why beings far older than your Krellian invaders chose to leave certain worlds alone. Daniel pressed the oath stone against his chest. It burned now, really burned, but he didn't let go. He spoke the summoning words, the ancient phrase his grandfather had taught him. The phrase that every oath keeper learned before they learned anything else. The stone flared bright enough to light the entire cavern. And across 12 colony worlds, in hidden rooms and secret places, other oath stones answered. Humans who had kept the vigil for generations felt the call burn in their hearts. Felt the bond that had never really broken, just sleeping, suddenly snap back to life. In work camps and slave pens, in hidden resistance cells and underground bunkers, oath keepers felt it. They grabbed their stones, their books, their sacred objects passed down through families. They stood up, looked toward the sky and knew. The dragons were coming back. The Alliance was reborn. And the Krellians had no idea what they'd awakened. Admiral Vrakos stared at his tactical display and felt something he hadn't experienced in 30 years of military service. True bone-deep fear. The holographic map showed the New Horizon system in miniature, with little icons representing his fleet. Except half those icons were now flashing red. Then gray. Then disappearing completely. Ships that had taken years to build and crew were just gone. Erased in minutes. This is impossible, Vrakos clicked, his mouth parts working frantically. The entire 7th Fleet, gone. Just gone. The 3rd Fleet reported hull breaches and then nothing. What are these things? His strategic officer, Threm, worked at his console with trembling claws. He'd been pulling data from the last moments of destroyed ships, trying to piece together what was happening. What he found made no sense. Sir, I have the final transmission from the battleship Rending Claw, Threm said. His voice was quiet. Scared. You need to see this. The main view screen flickered. Shaky footage appeared, clearly from a helmet camera. Someone running through a corridor. Red emergency lighting. The screech of tearing metal. Then the camera turned and Vrakos saw it. A massive reptilian head punched through the wall like it was made of paper. Scales the color of old bronze. Eyes that glowed with intelligence no animal should have. The creature's jaws opened and energy poured out. Not fire, not plasma, but something that made reality itself seem to crack and splinter where it touched. The battleship's shields flickered and died. Just stopped working like someone had flipped a switch. But that wasn't the worst part. On the creature's back sat a human. Male, maybe 30 years old, wearing armor that moved like living tissue. He made a simple hand gesture, just pointed at something off camera. The dragon responded instantly, its massive head swiveling to follow the direction. Another breath of that terrible energy and the footage cut to static. Intelligence reports they call themselves the Dragon Core, Threm said. He was pulling up more files, more images. We thought dragons were mythology. Children's stories. But they're real. Ancient Earth creatures. And the humans have been partnered with them for over 500 years. Impossible, Vrakos said again. It was becoming his favorite word. No species can bond across genetic lines like this. You can't just share consciousness with something that evolved on a different world. Biology doesn't work that way. Watch this, Threm said grimly. He pulled up another clip. This one showed external footage from a cruiser's hull camera. A dragon, deep green with golden highlights, banking hard through space. No thrusters. No visible means of propulsion. It just moved, defying physics in ways that made Vrakos's head hurt. On its back, the rider leaned into the turn. Not adjusting afterward. Not compensating. Moving at the exact same instant as the dragon, like they were one organism with two bodies. The human pointed, and before his hand even finished the gesture, the dragon was breathing. That same reality-breaking energy lanced out, and 3 Krellian fighters simply stopped existing. Not exploded. Not damaged. Just converted into expanding clouds of gas and debris. They fight as one being, Threm explained. Every pair is like this. Perfect synchronization. We've analyzed the timing. The dragon responds to the rider's intentions before they even fully form them. They don't use communication arrays. They don't need to. They seem to share thoughts directly. Vrakos watched the footage loop. Watched the perfect coordination. The absolute unity of purpose. He'd commanded fleets for decades. He knew what good teamwork looked like. This wasn't teamwork. This was something else entirely. This was 2 minds operating as one. His manipulator appendage slammed against the console, cracking the display. Send the 9th and 11th fleets to New Horizon. Full strength. Maximum weapons load. I want every ship we can spare converging on that system. Sir, Threm said carefully. We've already lost. I don't care. Vrakos roared. The bridge went silent. Every crew member turned to look at their admiral. Whatever these creatures are, they can be killed. They're biological. They bleed. Concentrate enough firepower and anything will die. Send the fleets. Threm bowed his head and started transmitting orders. 3 days later, 200 Krellian warships dropped out of hyperspace above New Horizon. The largest battle fleet ever assembled in Dominion history. Enough firepower to glass an entire planet. Enough ships to blot out the sun. They found 17 dragons waiting for them. Just 17. Vrakos allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. His forces outnumbered the enemy more than 10 to 1. No matter how tough these creatures were, they couldn't fight those odds. Then the dragons moved, and Vrakos realized he'd made a terrible mistake. Commander Rachel Brooks felt Thornscale's excitement thrumming through their bond. Her dragon loved this. Loved the challenge. Loved the chance to fly and fight and show the galaxy what dragons could do. Easy boy, Rachel murmured, even though she didn't need to speak out loud. Thornscale could feel her thoughts. Let them get into formation first. Let them think they've got us. Below them, New Horizon hung like a blue-green jewel. Rachel had grown up there. Her parents had been oathkeepers. Her grandmother before them. She'd learned to ride dragons before she learned to read. This was her home, and these Krellian invaders had hurt her people. Now it was time to hurt them back. The Krellian fleet moved into attack formation, a classic pincer movement designed to catch enemies in crossfire. Rachel watched their positioning and felt a grim satisfaction. They were treating this like a normal space battle. Ship against ship. Technology against technology. They still didn't understand what they were facing. All riders, this is Brooks, Rachel transmitted over the Oathkeeper network. Left wing formation, break pattern delta on my mark. She didn't need to explain. Every rider knew pattern delta. They'd practiced it 1,000 times in simulation and another 1,000 times in actual flight. It was one of the oldest tactical maneuvers in the Dragon Corps, developed centuries ago when humans first learned to fight alongside dragons. Mark. 5 dragons peeled off in perfect unison. No hesitation. No delay. They moved as one, diving toward the Krellian left flank. Rachel felt Thornscale's battle joy spike as they accelerated, felt her own fierce satisfaction mixing with his emotions until she couldn't tell where her feelings ended and his began. The Krellians opened fire. Plasma bolts filled space, turning the void into a light show of death. Each bolt carried enough energy to vaporize a building. Hundreds of them converged on the diving dragons. Thornscale moved like liquid shadow. He wasn't where the targeting computers predicted. Wasn't where physics said he should be. Dragons didn't follow normal rules. They bent space around themselves, slipped between moments, existed half in reality and half in something else. The plasma bolts missed. All of them. Now, Rachel thought, and Thornscale understood. He opened his jaws and breathed. Pure energy poured out, not fire, not plasma, but something fundamental. something that existed before matter learned to organize itself. Where it touched the Krellian command carrier, shields just stopped working. Hull plating sublimated into gas. Internal bulkheads melted like wax. The carrier split in half, both sections tumbling away in different directions. Around Rachel, the other 4 riders were executing their own attacks with the same devastating precision. Lisa Chin and her Dragon Skyfire gutted a battleship. Michael Torres and Stormwing converted 3 cruisers into debris. Every strike was perfect. Every attack coordinated down to the microsecond. This was what the Oathkeepers had trained for. What they'd waited generations to do again. Not just fighting. Not just winning. But showing the galaxy what humans and dragons could accomplish together. Admiral Vrakos is retreating, Lieutenant Tom Anderson reported. His Dragon Nightwing pulled alongside Thornscale, matching speed effortlessly. His flagship just broke formation. Should we pursue? Rachel considered it. They could catch Vrakos easily. And this here and now. But she thought about Emily Grant and her crayon drawings. About all the children who'd kept the faith when the rest of humanity forgot. No, Rachel decided. Let him run. Let him tell the other Krellian commanders what he saw here. Let him spread the word about what happens when you hurt our people. She looked down at New Horizon. Already she could see Krellian ground forces surrendering. They'd seen the battle in orbit. Watched their fleet get torn apart. They knew they'd lost. Human colonists were emerging from hiding. From work camps and slave pens. From underground bunkers and secret shelters. Rachel's enhanced vision could see them pointing up at the sky. Could see children crying with joy at the impossible sight above them. Dragons. Real dragons, just like the old songs promised. Just like the story said. The children had been right to believe. And the dragons had come back, exactly when humanity needed them most. The Galactic Council chamber had never been this quiet. Daniel Reed had attended 3 council sessions before, back when humanity was just another minor species begging for trade agreements and colonization rights. Those sessions had been loud. Chaotic. Dozens of species all talking over each other, making deals, forming alliances, breaking them just as quickly. Today you could hear a pin drop. Daniel stood at the central podium, the same one he'd stood at 6 months ago when he'd come to plead for help against the Krellian invasion. Back then, the council had listened politely for about 5 minutes before moving on to more important matters. Humanity's problems weren't their concern. That's what the Vothian ambassador had said. Every species must learn to defend itself. Well, they'd learned. Behind Daniel, coiled in the space normally reserved for security guards and aides, rested Empress Aurelia. Her massive form took up a quarter of the chamber. Her scales caught the light from the council's central sun lamp, throwing patterns of deep blue across the polished floor. Every single ambassador kept glancing at her nervously, like they expected her to suddenly start breathing fire. Daniel cleared his throat. The sound echoed in the silence. 6 months ago, he began, I stood here and asked for help. The Krellian Dominion had invaded 12 human colony worlds. Enslaved 300,000 of our people. Destroyed our defense fleet. I showed you evidence. I presented witness testimony. I begged you to intervene. He paused, letting that sink in. Several ambassadors had the decency to look uncomfortable. You told me the council doesn't interfere in territorial disputes, Daniel continued. That every species must handle its own problems. That humanity should have built better defenses if we didn't want to be conquered. Ambassador Krell of the Vothian Collective shifted in his seat. His 4 arms folded across his chest in what Daniel had learned was a defensive posture. The council has protocols. We cannot take sides in every conflict that. I'm not finished, Daniel said quietly. But there was steel in his voice. The kind that made Krell's mouth snap shut. For 500 years, Daniel continued, humanity has kept a secret. Not because we wanted to deceive anyone. Not because we were planning to use it as a weapon. We kept it secret because the beings we'd partnered with asked us to. Because they'd seen what happened when other species encountered things they couldn't understand. Things they couldn't control. Things that made them afraid. He gestured to Aurelia without looking back. Dragons. Real living dragons. Ancient beings who were on Earth before humans even developed written language. They could have ruled our planet as gods. Could have enslaved us. Destroyed us. Instead they offered us something else. Partnership. Friendship. Alliance. Alliance. Aurelia's voice resonated through every mind in the chamber simultaneously. Several ambassadors jumped. A few reached for weapons they weren't carrying. Not conquest. Not servitude. True partnership between equals. How is that possible? This came from Ambassador Theron, a crystalline being who communicated through light pulses. Your species are completely different. Different evolution. Different biology. Different thought patterns. Daniel smiled. That's exactly why it works. We're different so we complement each other. Dragons see things humans can't. Humans understand things dragons don't. Together, we're stronger than either species could ever be alone. He pulled up a holographic display showing footage from the Battle of New Horizon. The council watched as dragons and riders moved in perfect synchronization, fighting with a coordination that shouldn't have been possible. You see that? Daniel pointed at the screen. That's Commander Rachel Brooks and her dragon Thorn Scale. They've been bonded for 12 years. They don't use radios or communication systems. They share thoughts directly. When Rachel thinks about attacking a target, Thorn Scale already knows. They don't have to discuss strategy. They are the strategy together. This is all very impressive, Ambassador Krell said. His tone suggested it was anything but. But you've proven your point. You have weapons. You have power. What's to stop you from using these dragons to conquer the rest of us? To become the next Krellian Dominion, but worse? The chamber murmured in agreement. That was the question they all wanted answered. That was the fear Daniel could see in their faces. The same thing that stopped us 500 years ago, Daniel said. We don't want to. He let that sit for a moment. Then continued. When dragons first revealed themselves to humans, we were terrified. We had legends about dragons being monsters. Evil creatures that destroyed cities and hoarded treasure. Some humans wanted to kill them. Others wanted to capture and control them. We reacted exactly how you'd expect a primitive species to react when faced with something more powerful. What changed? Theron asked. A child, Daniel said simply. A little girl named Beth Coleman. She was 7 years old. She lived in what's now called Colorado. One day she found an injured dragon in the mountains. Instead of running away or calling for help, she tried to help it. Brought it water. Food. Stayed with it even though she was terrified. Daniel pulled up an ancient image, a primitive photograph yellowed with age. It showed a small girl sitting next to a massive green dragon, her hand resting on its scales. That dragon was Thornscale's great-great-grandfather, Daniel said. He told the other dragons about the human child who helped him when she had every reason to be afraid. Who showed kindness to something that could have killed her with a thought. That's when the dragons realized humanity might be different. Might be worth partnering with. A nice story, Krell said dismissively. But that was centuries ago. What about now? What about? The door to the council chamber burst open. A small figure ran in, a human child maybe 9 years old with dark hair pulled back in braids. Security tried to stop her, but Aurelia's tail moved, gently blocking their path. I'm sorry, the girl said breathlessly. She was holding something against her chest. I know I'm not supposed to be here. But Daniel said, he said he was going to talk about my sister. About Emily. Daniel's expression softened. Sophie. It's okay. Come here. Sophie Grant walked to the podium on shaky legs. Every ambassador in the chamber watched her. This tiny human child, alone among beings that could crush her without effort. She should have been terrified. Instead, she looked up at Aurelia and smiled. Hi, Sophie said. You're really pretty. Emily would have loved to meet you. Aurelia lowered her massive head until one eye was level with Sophie. Tell me about your sister, little one. Sophie clutched her book tighter. Emily was 8. The Krellians killed her because she drew pictures of dragons. She believed you'd come back. Believed it even when everyone told her stories weren't real. She opened the book, showing the council the crude crayon drawings. Dragons protecting humans. Dragons breathing fire at enemies. And on the last page, that image of a small figure riding a great blue dragon into battle. She titled it, When the Dragons Come Back, Sophie said. Her voice was small but steady. The Krellians found it during an inspection. They asked what it meant. Emily told them the dragons would return when humans needed them most. And they killed her for it, Daniel added quietly. An 8-year-old child. Murdered for keeping faith in an old alliance. The chamber was silent again. But this was a different kind of silence. Thoughtful. Uncomfortable. Sophie looked around at all the assembled ambassadors. Emily drew pictures of everyone, she said. Not just humans and dragons. She drew Krellians too. And Vothians. And Therans. All working together. She pulled out more pages from her book. Crude drawings showing different species standing together. Fighting together. Building together. She said maybe someday everyone would learn what humans and dragons learned, Sophie continued. That being different doesn't mean being enemies. That the strongest thing in the universe isn't weapons or ships or who can hurt who the worst. What is it then? Ambassador Theron asked gently. Sophie smiled. Friendship. Real friendship. The kind where you help each other even when it's hard. Where you remember promises even when it's been hundreds of years. She walked over to Admiral Vrakos, who knelt in the prisoner's circle. The Krellian leader who'd ordered the invasion. Who'd enslaved human worlds. Who'd killed Emily for drawing dragons. Sophie held out the book. She drew one for you too. Before everything happened. Before you came. Vrakos took the book with trembling claws. The page showed a Krellian standing beside a great copper dragon. Both were protecting a group of small figures, humans and Krellians side by side. I don't understand, Vrakos clicked quietly. That's okay, Sophie said. Emily said that's where friendship starts. Not understanding. Just wanting to try. Daniel stepped forward. We're offering the same thing to all of you. True alliance. Not you serving us. Not us serving you. Partnership. The way humans and dragons have partnered for 5 centuries. We will teach any species who wishes to learn, Aurelia added. How to bond across differences. How to build trust that spans generations. How to be stronger together than you ever could be apart. And the Krellians? Krell demanded. What mercy do you show to those who showed you none? Daniel looked at Vrakos. At the broken admiral who'd learned too late what he was really fighting. We show them the same mercy dragons showed us, Daniel said. When humans were violent and primitive, when we had every reason to fear each other, dragons chose to see potential instead of threat. They taught us, guided us, showed us a better way. He walked over to Vrakos. You have a choice, Admiral. Go back to your people and tell them what you learned here. That there's more than one way to be strong. That conquest and control are the weakest forms of power. Or keep fighting and face not just humans, but every species who decides they'd rather build friendships than empires. Vrakos stared at the drawing. At the crude crayon image of what might have been. What still could be. I will tell them, he said finally. About the child. About the dragons. About. He paused. About the species that makes friends with legends. The Galactic Council session continued for another 6 hours. By the end, 17 species had approached Daniel about forming alliances. Not surrender. Not treaties. Real partnerships. As the session ended, Daniel stood with Sophie watching Aurelia spread her wings. The late afternoon light caught her scales, turning her into something out of the old stories. The stories that Oathkeepers had kept alive. The stories Emily had believed in. Your sister was right, Daniel told Sophie quietly. Dragons do come back when we need them most. And now, maybe the whole galaxy will learn what she already knew. That the strongest power isn't the ability to destroy. It's the courage to trust. Sophie nodded, holding her book close. Emily would be happy. She always said humans were special because we knew how to make impossible friends. High above, dragons circled New Horizon. Not as weapons. Not as conquerors. As partners. As friends. As proof that sometimes, if you keep faith long enough, legends wake up and remember why they loved you. And the galaxy watched and learned and slowly, carefully began to believe in impossible things too.